Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Renegade Operative, and today I will be doing a distinctive review for Resident Evil Code Veronica X. This game was released on the Dreamcast, I think in the year 2000, and then they had a subsequent re-release that contained additional scenes, and it could be dubbed as a director's cut to some extent. They wanted to capitalize on the PS2, they wanted to capitalize on that money, and they decided to put this game out there for the masses and get it in more hands, and I understand the reasoning behind it. This decision made sense. We're going on and we're covering the PS2 to PS4 version as well as the PS3 version. We will be talking about differences later on as we get in this review. We have to start with the basic synopsis of the story. The story begins with Claire Redfield doing a raid on an umbrella complex in Europe. If you don't know, fans basically dubbed this game as the true sequel to Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis for good reason. If you remember the note that you could obtain off of Chris Redfield's desk in Resident Evil 2, it clearly says, "I have gone to Europe, don't tell my sister, I want Jill, I want Barry, I want you guys to come with me and not say anything. We're going to expose Umbrella for being rotten to the core. They are the ones who committed to this outbreak, they are the ones responsible. We are going after them in Europe and we are going after their main HQ hard." Claire takes this logic to the extreme and she becomes a one-woman killing machine, going to Umbrella's main HQ and taking out several guards. She is then apprehended by one of the guards, who basically is called Rodrigo, and he takes her to the Rockford Island prison base for her to get transferred. Then there's an outbreak, everything's gone to shit. You know how Resident Evil goes. Nothing ever goes well in this universe. Rodrigo then releases you from your cell. Unfortunately, you have to cut through a graveyard, and that's where the nightmare begins. Now, let's talk about the gameplay really quickly. If we give a general overview, it's going to be your standard Resident Evil flair. It's going to be fixed cameras, tank controls, maybe some jump scares, putting you in scenarios where you get overwhelmed by enemies. There is some cool stuff that this game introduces, like the knife is super powerful. You can cut down a fucking tree with that thing. You can cut down enemies in half. This is the most powerful knife I've seen in a Resident Evil title, which makes knife only runs really rewarding. At the same time, you're going to feel that sense of familiarity with this game. You're going to feel like I played this before. There's not many additions, but you might be fine with that as a Resident Evil fan. I enjoyed the gameplay for what it was. I like the fact that they introduced new things like dual wielding guns, all that jazz. That was cool. That was great. I like the fact that it had like multiple new scenarios. It had new enemies to experiment and play around with. It just didn't feel super substantial. I think the main thing that stands out with Resident Evil Code Veronica is the fact that there's no more pre-rendered backgrounds. Everything is like a 3D environment. That's the main pitch for this game. They put everything in a 3D world and it just looks better because of it. You know, it's less of these pauses where you're going down the corner, then the frame rate and the camera has a slight little pause and it has to adjust. That doesn't happen in this game. It feels so good that everything is in 3D in real time because the performance really shows in this game. It really shines and it feels well done. That's one awesome thing that they did for Resident Evil Code Veronica. If I were to give a general overview for the story of Resident Evil Code Veronica, I would say that this is when everything started to get meat on the bones. This is when everything started to become batshit crazy in a good way. I'm talking, you have the lore of the Ashford twins and the tragedy between them and how there's this sort of weird relationship between Alfred Ashford and Alexia Ashford, and he's trying not to let his sister go because his sister is dead in his mind and she's being held in cryogenic stasis, unknown if she's going to wake up or not. So he starts to do weird things. He starts to really protect the Rockford Island base. He starts to even cross-dress as his sister, and that's weird. Like, this story gets really crazy and strange. It's all a mental trip from start to finish. And then you have this beautiful sort of melancholy revival of Alexia Ashford, and she becomes the main antagonist for the Antarctic base, and you really feel this struggle between all the characters. It's a little bit more serious when you get to to Chris, and Claire is also a little bit more grown, you know, she has that experience. She really is homing in on the fact that she is still a savior to this kid that's at the Rockford Island base, and his name is Steve Burnside. Now, Steve can be quite the annoying character. I've seen it before. People memed on him. They don't like his voice. Alfred Ashford sounded weird, and he's one of the main antagonists of this game. You cannot deny, though, that the tragedy of Steve Burnside resonates hard with the story when you're playing with Claire. Like, you really still feel that loss when he finally dies and he confesses to her. I mean, it is corny. It definitely is goofball Resident Evil material. However, it is important for the Resident Evil characterization going forward, because it does strike a chord that this is someone that Claire could not save. What will happen if you could save this person? You can't. They were infected, and this is how the story goes. It plays on that drama, and it plays on it really well. Then you have the first on-screen meeting of Chris Redfield and Claire Redfield, and immediately you're like, this is really a brother and sister connection. This is something I can get behind. And he cuts her down from the goo on the wall, and then either Claire is poisoned by the previous boss fight, and you have to run and get her some serum, which is a parallel to Resident Evil 1. There's also the fact that this connection, this relationship, is a parallel to the main antagonist, because they are also twin brothers and sisters, and their family is falling apart because they decided to completely lock up their father, experiment on him, and experiment either with some virus or whatever. You see the circumstances of these events, and you don't want the other characters, you don't want the good guys to end up like this, so you're doing everything you can to fight against it. We didn't even touch on the star attraction, the elephant in the room, Albert freaking Wesker. This guy is a complete menace throughout the entire story. He completely hounds Claire, he completely hounds Chris, and he comes back from the original game, and you're wondering what's going on. Why is his eyes red? Why does he have these cat-like eyes? And then you realize he's infected with some superhuman virus. So you're trying to figure out, how did this come into fruition, and what's going to happen with the other characters. You don't know if he's going to kill someone or not. So usually I'm not a fan of when there's way too many antagonists, because it makes the plot a little bit harder to follow. It makes motivations harder to do. This game pulled it off. It shifts between crazy Alfred, then you go to Alexia, whose powers are great in this game with T Veronica, and you're trying to find out like what this new virus does. Then you have Albert Wesker, who is a superhuman threat that you remember from the first game, and you don't know what his motivations are. You just remember he killed Star's team. He's there to collect biological data, and that means that everything is bad for business once you start to get into the storyline. I just love that moment of constant taunting from Albert Wesker, saying that, well, maybe I could bring Steve Burnside back to life, and you know that's all a hill of bullshit as you progress later in the series. Just harassing the characters, almost killing them. It's a great thing to see, because you want your characters challenged to some degree. After all this time, you think, what is the next threat going to be within the Resident Evil mythos? Well, here he is, and he's wearing black sunglasses. I think the story is a real allegory for testing the resolve of these characters. We saw the origin story of Chris Redfield and Claire Redfield. Now we're seeing how they develop against new challenges, new adversity, and new threats. This is a testament to all of that, and the villains really add substance to what is going on with this test. I think if you like the previous 3 stories, you will definitely like Resident Evil Code Veronica for what they put on display. The only real criticism I can give here, and it kind of supplements the story, but it's really not a story issue, it's just the acting. Some of the acting is a little bit spotty. Now granted, sometimes even Alexia can say like a weird line or two, but I didn't mind her. And then there's like Wesker, who is solid, Chris is solid, Claire is solid, Rodrigo's solid, and then there's Steve and Alfred. Steve saying, "Father, no!" Like, that is terrible in my opinion, and Alfred doing this weird girly giggly laugh. It's like just so odd, and it kind of, it's funny, it's B-movie cheese, I understand, but this is where Resident Evil tried to amplify the acting department, and it didn't all migrate to the finish line in my opinion. Sometimes it can suffer from being really goofy or really stupid at times. It's just Resident Evil, so you're gonna love it either way. Still, I feel like if those characters, if Alfred and Steve was really strong in the voice acting department, then it would have been solid all around with the cast. However, that being said, if you want to see a solid Steve Burnside being voiced well, then look no further at Dark Side Chronicles, where his voice is just fine. Okay, so I really want to recap on version differences between the original Code Veronica and Resident Evil Code Veronica X. Now, from what I've been told, they did clean up the UI. The UI is less shiny than it was in the original, and there's also an elevator scene where Chris watches Claire get in the elevator in the original, and then there's also the fact that Chris runs to the elevator immediately once he defeats Alexia, and then he slaps the elevator panel and goes down. That's only in the original so far. Those scenes have been altered or they've been straight cut in the X version, but the X version shows a lot more. I keep saying X version, I know it sounds like X videos, please fucking forgive me. The X videos version, or the X version, just gives you a lot more in terms of seeing context. I guess I'll go one by one here. So they changed Steve's hair because I guess, you know, they thought he looked like that guy from the Titanic, you know, DiCaprio and shit. So they got rid of that hairstyle and gave him bangs. And then there's a more illustrated Wesker appearance. This means that Wesker is in the game a bit more in Resident Evil Code Veronica X. Now, in the original, he is there, no doubt he is there. It's just a more diminished role than what you were expecting. And then the main scene that everyone points to that was changed was when Alexia beats the living tar out of Wesker. She beats the holy bejesus out of this man, and I guess they thought, hey, this doesn't really make much sense to bring Wesker back and then have him absolutely dominated. So we're gonna change this scene up a bit where the power balance is even. Alexia is even with Wesker and Wesker is even with her, and it all sorts itself out, and that's exactly what they did. Some fans prefer the original scene where Wesker is getting absolutely stomped, and some fans prefer the draw that happens in Resident Evil Code Veronica X. I believe there's also several notions of dialogue to reflect Wesker's more exaggerated appearance. Like in Rockford Island, he's surprised to see Chris there, whereas in the X version, he is more amused to see Chris Redfield than anything. And then there's the fact that Claire gets beaten down by Wesker, which is not in the original, and then there's the ending in the original as well, where Wesker kidnaps Claire, throws her to the side, and then Chris says, you know, come on Wesker, let her go, you don't want her. He does, then he explains his plans, then he says that, well, I'm going to use Steve as an extract, maybe I could bring him back to life, and then there's the final fight between Wesker and Chris that's not in the original game. That is a lot of missing context from the original. I know it's all cutscenes, cosmetic appearance, etc. It's still a lot to take in. I don't know why Capcom did not release that version initially. Maybe budgetary constraints. Maybe someone in the comments can let me know, because I know that Resident Evil Code Veronica X did release on the Dreamcast in another region. However, that being said, what is the reason why they did not release this version initially on consoles? Like, I want to know why, because there's a lot of cut stuff in that Dreamcast version. Anyway, if you want that context, I would say get that version. If you're curious about playing the Dreamcast version, go play it anyway. There is a slight version difference between the PS2 to PS4 and the PS3 version. Now, I said that they had this bundle called Revival Selection for the PS3, and you could get Code Veronica X Remastered and you could get Resident Evil 4. Code Veronica X Remastered, they do try to touch up on the shadows and the lighting and everything. It's not like a graphical overhaul, but there is clear things going on where they try to make it a little bit more atmospheric with the touch-ups. That being said, I do not like the yellow filter that's sprinkled on the characters. It looks a little bit out of place. It looks a little bit weird. That being said, if you want some sort of remaster, some sort of touch-up where the graphics look a little bit better, then I would recommend this version. The PS2 to PS4 version is a straight-up port or a straight-up emulation of the PS2 version, and it's what you would expect. It looks exactly like the older game, just, you know, no touch-ups, all the shadows from the original, everything from the original PS2 version is there. It's still functional, it's still playable. If you can't get your hands on it one way or the other, you could at least buy this one or the one that was on the PS3. Also, you probably shouldn't forget that this game is going to be free this month on Xbox Gold. Yes, it's coming this month at the time of this recording, therefore you could get Code Veronica on the Xbox Live Marketplace too. I think here we're gonna talk about how I felt about the enemies in this game, and honestly, some enemies are piss easy, what you would expect. The typical reoccurring zombie is piss easy, and then you have to deal with stuff like moths. The moths are annoying in this game. They can lay eggs in you, they can poison you. It's such a fucking mess. I hate those enemies so much. They respawn too. And then there's the hunters, where it's like, okay, regular hunters, they can go down with the shotgun, that's no problem. Then you have to deal with sweepers. Sweepers are poisonous hunters in the military base, and you have to deal with them, and it's so fucking annoying. They're also in the Antarctic base as well. It's like, go away. They touch you one time, one swipe, you're getting poisoned. I understand this adds adversity to the game. They're just annoying enemies either way. It increases the tension, I'm sure. I'm really sure of this, but I just found them to be a pain in the ass, especially in that spot when you're playing as Chris and you're in front of the military complex and there's like 3 sweepers or something like that. It's super crazy. Then there's the enemies where there's the Bandersnatchers, the guys with one elongated arm, and honestly, once you're on stairs or whatever, they really can't touch you. You could kind of kite those enemies, so I really didn't have much of a problem unless I was surrounded by them. Then we go to bosses where there's like the Albinoid. You don't have to fight them. You really don't have to fight them. Just grab the crest and go. Alexander, he could be kind of hard, but just pump all your ammo into him, he's done. Alexia, she could be kind of annoying too. Like, most of the bosses in this game range from annoying to readily decent, and it's few and far between. Like, most of them can be annoying if you really don't know what you're doing. That tyrant on the plane can really fuck you up if you have no idea how to handle him. Bring that BOW gas, blow him to Kingdom Come, and just fucking get him off the plane immediately, because I found that guy to be a nuisance once he gets close to you and he starts hitting you. Like, he really takes some damage. Like, you're really gonna have to be on your toes in this game compared to RE2. Even RE3, like, that's hard too. Like, I would say they're on a comparable level in terms of being hard, but I guess Code Veronica kind of takes it to a new plateau because there's so much the game throws at you at once. I would even say this game is a little bit harder than RE3. Think about it for a second. Like, Steve could take you out in 2 hits if you don't know what you're doing. Like, first time players, you're gonna be thrown through the ringer until you finally grasp what this game wants you to do, which is to learn, adapt, and survive. That might not be for everyone because there's a fine line between fun and infuriating, and this game definitely walks on that line. Let's finally recap on the things that I liked and disliked. So the things I liked: Battle Game, which is a game that you unlock at the end of the game, and you could play with various characters in third person or first person. You could play as Chris, Claire, Wesker, Steve, Burnside. It's so cool, it's so awesome that you can go and just essentially do what is equivalent to Resident Evil Outbreak with Showdown. Clear a room full of enemies and then fight a boss enemy at the end of the stage, each boss being different for each character, and then you could do things like speed run that. That's the extra incentive there. That's the replay value. I enjoy Battle Game. The story is good. The atmosphere, putting you in new scenarios with new creatures and unexpected things like zombies bursting this little like parasite out of their chest that attacks Chris. I thought that was cool. There are side quests like the one with Rodrigo where you have to get him the hemo medicine, and once you get him that, then he'll give you a lighter which could be used to unlock 2 Uzis once Rodrigo dies. I wish the game had a little bit more of that, but when it did, I did enjoy it. Then the things I disliked: I didn't like the backtracking. I thought it was way too strenuous. I thought some of the voice acting was shoddy. There's also regression from RE3 because you don't get a reloading tool, you can't craft bullets, you can't make your own bullets, you can only get the beryllium cases, and you could get the bowgun darts that could be explosive. At the same time, I missed the reloading tool. That was cool. They should have carried that over, and that was the predecessor. That was the previous game that came out. Fighting on the stairs too, that's also gone. freeform fighting on the stairs is gone in Code Veronica. I related the difficulty spikes to a nitpick because there are times where I'm 50-50. I like the pacing of this game and how it goes and how you learn, and then there's other times where it's like a new enemy comes out of nowhere and you get completely fucked for it. I also hated the zapping in this game, the switching between two characters and switching items, and the fact that you could lose potential weapons even more in this game compared to RE2. They did it poorly in this game. I did not like zapping in this game. I thought it was poorly done, sloppy, messy. Claire can keep your guns forever. For first time players, that's a bit of a very hard point to really deal with. Let's give this sucker a score. I give this game a 7.9 out of 10. I think this game is a good one. I think it is something you should experience. This is something every Resident Evil fan should play. At the same time, there's better made RE games in this series that definitely trumps Code Veronica. Remake 1 comes to mind. That game completely destroys CVX in my opinion from top to bottom with what they added and everything they introduced and how the gameplay works. That game is phenomenal. I think this game is something worth playing in the RE series and you should experience it. They just have some pitfalls here or there that could have been ironed out if they spent more time on it. That being said, I want to say real quick, I thought RE3 was more fun. It was more fun from a gameplay perspective, just saying. CVX did not scratch that itch for me. I think RE3 OG is definitely higher. Anyway, this is Renegade Operative signing off. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed my off-the-cuff review for Resident Evil Code Veronica X. I really put in a lot of thought, effort into it, and this video has stretched into a 20-minute time limit, so I'm going to say like the video, share, subscribe, hit that bell icon to be updated and notified with all my videos. Be sure to follow me on the splash screen, the social media below, the description. You have everything there at your disposal. Talk in the comment section. Tell me how you feel about Resident Evil Code Veronica. Does your score differ from mine? Sound off below and let me know. Until then, I'll see you zombie hunters later. Take care, peace out, and stay safe. Ciao.